Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion opens with Abraham sitting outside his tent under the terebinth of Mamre. We don't know what a terebinth is, but it's such a nice word I had to say it. And looking up and seeing coming over the horizon 3 honored guests. It is our pleasure this morning to welcome 3 honored guests to this congregation. I will introduce them in a way that does not suit the size of their achievements, but I promise you'd much rather be listening to them than listening to me talk about them. We have with us Rabbi Mark Diamond, our own congregant, who is the head of the Board of Rabbis. We also have Tim Pownall. May I call you Tim? It says here William Timothy. Tim is fine, okay. Who is the Assistant Director of the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution and the Director of the, do I pronounce it Pachis Project, which is in faith-based diplomacy. He's also a mediator and has been a mediator for many years. And we have Najiba Said Miller, who has just been appointed Assistant Professor of Interreligious Education at Claremont School of Theology, and comes to Claremont with a train behind her of instances of dispute resolution, which include gender issues and community activism, gang intervention, diversity training in universities, and particularly relevant for us this morning, interreligious dialogue among the Abrahamic traditions. And when it became clear that we were going to be able to host these 3 guests this morning, I asked, would each of them share with us a brief thought about the Torah portion that we have just read. I believe that Mark is up first, so let me introduce Rabbi Mark Diamond, who will introduce his colleagues. Sit back, be comfortable. This is going to be fascinating.
Well, good morning and Shabbat Shalom. I thought Rabbi Silver was my friend, but when she said I should speak about Abraham in 5 minutes in the Jewish tradition, I don't know what kind of friend that is, but I thank you. It is a great honor to be here, and I want to not only thank our rabbis, but also thank you, and especially thank my dear colleagues and friends, Tim and Najiba. The 3 of us traveled together to Israel in June as part of an interfaith mission, and I believe after the Kiddush luncheon we're going to share some more specific reflections about that trip and about the work we do in interfaith relations and dispute resolution. I had a very valuable lesson today in cultural sensitivity, and one of my colleagues, who shall remain nameless to protect her identity, turned to me during the service and said, "Is it okay to talk during the service, Mark?" And that question never occurred to me before in all my years as a rabbi. I just never, so I'll consult with our, but you can't talk now during the drash, okay. So Abraham in the Jewish tradition. What do we know about Abraham from the written Torah? And this is sort of I'm going to run through this very quickly. This is your life, Abraham, okay? What do we know about Abraham, about Avraham Avinu in Jewish tradition in the book of Genesis? Brief highlights of his life. He is the son of Terah, who took his family from Ur to Canaan, but stopped short and stayed in Haran. Abraham's wife is Sarai, later to be known as Sarah. God calls Abram or Avram to set out for the land of Canaan. He chooses him to be the founder of a great nation, and we simply do not know why. Avram and Sarai journey to Egypt in a time of famine. Avram tells his wife to say that she is his sister, not his wife. She complies. Abraham is richly rewarded. Pharaoh is punished. Avram and Sarai are sent away hurriedly. Abraham or Avram is a great warrior who rescues his nephew Lot in battle. Abraham's maidservant Hagar bears him his firstborn son, Ishmael. And at that time, the names of the patriarch and matriarch are changed to Abraham and Sarah. That all took place in previous Torah portions. Now in today's very intriguing and challenging parashah, Abraham, the patriarch, argues with God over the fate of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And as you know, and this is something worthy of dispute resolution, he goes from 50 to 45 to 40 to 30, etc., and eventually down to 10, and says to God, if only 10 people are righteous in that city, will you save them? Lo and behold, there are not 10 righteous people, and the cities are destroyed. Furthermore, in today's Torah portion, Abraham and Sarah journey to the kingdom of Gerar, and they tell the king Avimelech, once again, Sarah is this man's sister, not his wife. Sarah bears a son Isaac, and promptly Hagar and Ishmael are banished from the household. Then, of course, in the concluding section of this morning's parashah, Abraham takes his son Isaac to Mount Moriah, nearly sacrifices him there on the altar, and thankfully an angel of God intervenes to spare the boy's life. Then, jumping ahead to, now we're done with today's parashah, next week's parashah, Sarah dies. She's buried in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Abraham dispatches his servant Eliezer to find a wife for Isaac, and he returns with the beautiful Rebekah. And again, in next week's parashah, or actually the end of this week, Abraham takes another wife, Keturah. He has 6 more children, and then next week he dies at the ripe old age of 175, whereupon his sons Isaac and Ishmael reunite to bury him in Hebron. That's what we know about Abraham. That's what we know about Abraham in the Torah. In rabbinic tradition, there are so many legends about this amazing man. Abraham, you know the ones from Hebrew school, Abraham, the idol smasher. His father Terach apparently had an idol shop. Okay, Abraham wrecks the idols in the name of his newfound faith. And it speaks, I think, friends, to a mixed review about Abraham's election as the forefather and founder of a new nation and a new faith. Did he deserve to be the man who founded this new faith, or is his election somehow a divine mystery? Abraham is a man who is renowned for his hachnasat orchim, his hospitality, as evidenced by today's portion, how warmly and richly he greets the strangers. Of course, it helps that Sarah does all the work in the kitchen. Okay. Abraham is renowned in rabbinic tradition as a master of keruv, of bringing people to his faith. All right, he's a good proselytizer, a great proselytizer. And since I'm surrounded by some wonderful attorneys here and people who do dispute resolution, Abraham is renowned as one of the greatest defense attorneys of all times, but not the greatest. He's better than Noah, who never argued for the fate of people in his generation, but he's not as great as Moses, who stood up and was the greatest defense attorney for the Jewish people. And again, as I alluded to earlier, many rabbis in the Jewish tradition argue that Abraham should have fought with God, argued with God, and gotten God down to the magic number of 1. If even one righteous person was to be found in Sodom and Gomorrah, then the city should not have been destroyed. And what about these 2 challenging episodes of Abraham passing his wife Sarah off as his sister? That's kind of interesting. Some sages defend his actions. Others criticize him for the ruse, and we never quite know exactly what Sarah thinks of this whole thing. Okay? And also, and again in this week's parashah, that really troubling story of Abraham expelling Hagar and Ishmael from his household. Did he do this because he somehow understood this was the divine plan, this is what God demanded of him? Or did he act cruelly and hastily at Sarah's behest? And then, of course, the closing chapter of the parashah, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Is this the triumphal moment of great faith on the part of the patriarch? Is this a strong and clear message that God no longer wants child sacrifice, that God abhors child sacrifice? Or, as I prefer to believe, maybe did Abraham get a little forblunged and didn't quite hear the divine command correctly, and perhaps God never wanted him to sacrifice his son. So with about a minute left, let me summarize what I think is the takeaway for Avraham Avinu in the Jewish tradition. And I would share with you, friends, 3 traits. First, this is a man of extraordinary vision. He saw the hand of one God in a milieu when other people saw the hands of many gods fighting with each other. They saw chaos in the world. Abraham saw order. He was clearly the great founder of monotheism and truly the forefather of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.